Hello, my name is Hilda Bernardo Marcel. I am going to call this part 2 of my video analysis of the Jamaica Kincaid's short story Girl. But this time, this is not just an analysis, but it is more of a personal reflection. Okay, so when I first read the Jamaica Kincaid short story Girl, I did not think much of it. While I understood the basic message, I did not foresee myself connecting to the piece so personally. So it wasn't until I completed my initial analysis, part 1 VRA, that as I replayed the video during each take and playback, I listened to myself and I realized more and more how familiar it all sounded. This realization led me back to the text, not to just analyze the story again, but this time to analyze myself, my cultural and personal experience in relation to the story, and what I have discovered in the end. So during my initial analysis, as I dived into the mother's voice in the Jamaica Kincaid's short story Girl, I was hearing echoes of my childhood, and even more surprisingly, I was hearing echoes of myself. First, I'd like to say that I have a daughter, and she is around the same age as the girl in the short story. She's about 12 years old, and at this point in her life and in my life, I'm finding myself recognizing some of the very same fears and motivations and even the communication style that the mother in the story Jamaican Kincaid possessed. Matter of fact, these voices, the voice of the mother, I grew up hearing it from my mother, aunts, older West Indian adults who I now see that they were just preparing us, their children, my peers, cousins, sister, myself, for adulthood and the realities of life. And without realizing it, and until I've analyzed initially the Jamaica Kincaid short story Girl, many of those lessons had become a part of my way of speaking in guiding my own daughter. From teaching my daughter how to carry herself as the young lady that she is becoming, I hear myself in my own voice when the mother in the story says, "Be sure to wash yourself every day, even with your own spit." That constant reminder of hygiene was so important. It was embedded in us, embedded in me, especially in our culture. I mean, we bleached everything in the household. I'm so accustomed to that strong stench of bleach when cleaning, and I even do it in my own house. This was one of the first lessons of my childhood, cleanliness. And while I'm trying to embed the same in my daughter, the extensiveness for a child her age in this day and age is not received the same, and it is sometimes misunderstood. We live in a culture now where people wear pajamas to class, and from my own upbringing and culture, that's absolutely taboo. Being clean and well-groomed at all time is an absolute must. Or when the mother says in the story, "Don't squat to play marbles. You're not a boy, you know." And I've said this to my daughter, maybe not about playing marbles, but telling her to correct the way she's acting because she's not a boy. And I've heard this expression in so many instances from my own mother. "You're not a boy, don't act this way or sit like that." Femininity is something that was constantly taught while growing up, always being corrected how girls are supposed to sit, how they're supposed to dress, how they're supposed to speak or behave or carry themselves. Femininity was emphasized so strongly in my childhood, and it is a cultural tradition almost that I've continued and unconsciously trying to pass down to my own child. Trying to pass down these same ideas. And let me tell you, it has proved to be more of a struggle. And there's been so much more pushback with my own daughter than how I reacted to those same principles with my mother. I received it and I applied it, but my own daughter doesn't like to wear dresses or skirts. And for a long time, she hated even wearing earrings. At this age, it's becoming harder and harder to push those ideas of femininity onto her, the way it was pushed onto me when she's into more than just makeup and dolls. It's more like she's into video games and sports. You know, we live in a culture where now boys and girls boundaries are being redefined, and these kids are encouraged to express themselves freely, not based on their who they are, if they're a boy or if they're a girl, if they like something. One of the most eye-opening realizations for me was realizing that, like the mother in the story, I have sometimes parented from the same place, that place of fear. And when I first read the story and we first discussed it in class, I initially judged the mother for her harsh tone, not realizing that I too have been guilty of using such a harsh tone. Maybe not specifically the word slut, but I've definitely been guilty of using criticism or name calling when it comes to parenting. The mother's repeated use of the word slut was disturbing to me, but after really analyzing it, it made me realize that while I have never used that specific word with my own daughter, I had to honestly reflect on whether I have ever used criticism, labels, or hurtful comments in attempts to prevent her from making certain choices, or in attempts from keeping her from something, or correcting her. And the answer is yes, because slut is not much different from using words like fast or other insults, even if they're not as vulgar. Like the mother in the story girl, my words are often rooted in fear rather than anger. And this was a hard pill to swallow for me. Growing up in a West Indians household, parents often do the name callings, salop, which means you're dirty, or egale, stupid, or like certain things. It doesn't necessarily mean, for example, maledve, you're raised wrong, when they're the ones raising you. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're calling you that name. From my understanding, it's they don't want you to be stupid. They don't want you to be dirty. So their way of trying to prevent you from doing this is by criticizing you. And it wasn't until my initial analysis that I saw this growing fear, where the mother in the story goes from the slut that you're so bent on becoming to the slut that I know you're so bent on becoming to the slut I have warned you against becoming. Those were different stages of fear. The initial realization that there is something to fear, to something is to be feared, and something is eventually going to come. We're going to prevent. I've warned you about it. And it wasn't until my initial VRA that I can see that some of those comments did not come from anger. They did not come from judgment, but they came from fear. And it's a growing fear that's happening in the story as she is telling her daughter how to navigate in this world. And for me, it's literally happening in my life in real time. I'm experiencing this growing fear just as the mother is in the story in this very moment. So as I did this first analysis, I was realizing this is exactly what I'm going through. This is what's been boiling inside of me. There's a fear for my daughter that's constantly boiling inside of me, just as the mother fear is growing in the story. Fear that comes from seeing my daughter growing up, the 7th grade she's now currently in the 7th grade, a stage in her life where her peers have more influence on her behavior. Boys are suddenly becoming interested, and she's exploring her identity and testing her boundaries. It's a terrifying stage, and I see behaviors, languages, influences amongst some children her age that concerns me. And I am immediately reminded of when I was growing up, the girls who grew up too fast, the little boys or men who want what they wanted, and the situation my peers found themselves in and the consequences that followed. As adults, I think we all have seen enough to know that one poor decision could have a lasting effect. And being that I am a person, I often find myself trying to get ahead of the problem before it even happens. So in many ways, that is exactly what the mother and girl is doing. She is trying to prevent a future of pain before it has ever had the chance to occur. And unfortunately, she uses such a vulgar term as a tool, as a preventative tool. Meaning, I know the dangers that exist for young girls. And for me, for my own daughter, and for the mom in the story, for the girl, she knows. She knows what's to come. You know, I see my daughter growing up. I see her developing and becoming more independent. And it's terrifying because, unfortunately, you cannot protect them from everything. So what do? You try to control what you can. And when I see the quotes, walk like a lady and not like the slut you're so bent on becoming, this is how to hem a dress. When you see the hem coming down, so that to prevent you from looking like the slut I know you're so bent on becoming, or even this is how to behave in the presence of men who you don't know very well. That way they won't recognize immediately the slut that I have warned you of becoming. I immediately think about my own child, my own daughter. She is involved in gymnastics and she has physically developed quicker than a lot of girls her age. And they're used to wearing these tights, these shorts, which worries me a lot because when she dresses up to go to practice and we have to step out, if we have to go to the store or something, I always tell her to put on a sweater, put a sweatpants over you. And she looks at me crazy because when she was a lot younger, and she's been doing this since she was like 4, it wasn't a thing. Her body, she was underdeveloped. These worries did not exist. But while I'm literally seeing it in real time where she's developing and now these clothes are tight fitting, these worries, they all of a sudden, I'm seeing a whole different world. And now my worries is about the attention that she may receive because of her attire, because of her physical development, especially from those with harmful intentions. We know what kind of world we live in. And the reality is that there are people who may view a young girl through a sexualized lens. And it's frightening. As a mother, I am immediately afraid that someone is going to take advantage of her innocence. Those fears often live quietly in the background of a lot of my parenting decisions and the way I speak to my daughter. You know, for 12 years old, we've been there before, knowing the pressure that comes with it, the influence and the mistakes that could be made. As a mother, the greatest fear is something's going to happen and I was unable to prevent it. And because those choices rest in her hands, my child's hands, I'm going to do everything possible to prevent it. So for the mother in the story, and for me, it's being afraid of her making choices, of the daughter making choices that could change the course of her life. As I look at myself, as I reflect on myself, like the mother in the story, many of the warnings to my daughter comes from my own experiences and seeing how certain decisions I made played out in my life. So the quote, "This is how you spit in the air if you feel like it, and this is how to move quick so that it doesn't fall on you," to me is a lesson of karma, of accountability. And it's the mother's desire to teach her child that some decisions that you make might come back on you. So the choices she makes might not immediately have repercussion, but spitting up in the air, it does come back down, and to be prepared to deal with it. And that's for good or bad decision. Every action has a reaction. And this is something that I've tried to embed in my daughter, especially in disciplining her. This is like a constant movie in my household. It's important that she thinks carefully about the consequences of her action before she does it. Is it worth it? Is it something that you could come back from? These are what I think about when I read that quote. Even telling the girl, don't throw stones at blackbirds because it might not be a blackbird at all. This has a much deeper meaning to me and is less about the blackbirds, but more about thinking before acting or making assumptions and judgment of people or situations before truly looking deeper at the big picture. I often find myself telling my daughter to treat others how you would want to be treated and not to judge people based on their outward appearance because you don't know their story. Everything that glitters is not gold, and someone's outward appearance doesn't dictate their true value, which is something that I've been trying to embed in my daughter, especially during her 7th grade year, where it's a tough year. There's catty girl fights. They're inserting themselves in drama that has nothing to do with anything but assumptions. And even for me as a parent, this quote speaks to me because while I'm warning her about misjudging, I've been guilty of doing just that. Misjudging situations involving my daughter, assuming the worst before I have all the facts. And the hardest truth I had to confront while reflecting on the Jamaica Kincaid short story girl was realizing that my daughter is not experiencing this parenting style in the same way or manner I experienced it growing up. Because growing up in a West Indian household, even though I was the more affectionate one, love was not always spoken. It was shown through sacrifice, protection, and discipline. I would get a lot of slack for expressing my emotions. If I cried a lot based on my feelings or expressed my feelings, I was frowned upon. Expressing how you feel would be viewed as sensitive or even disrespectful, telling someone how you feel. So when the mother from Jamaica Kincaid said, "This is how you smile at someone you don't like very much, and this is how you smile at someone you don't like at all," this was an instruction to keep your feelings in check so that you won't be viewed as disrespectful. Because in those cultures, talking back and telling people how you feel or how they make you feel, or even being passionate about something that is harmless can be viewed as disrespectful. No home training, malidve, which is the Creole word for badly raised or saying that you were raised badly. Even when the mother from Jamaica Kincaid said, "This is how you smile to someone you like completely." Well, why would I refrain from expressing myself to someone I like completely? When my mother spoke to me harshly or constantly reminded me what not to do, I didn't question whether or not she loved me. But this took me back because I would constantly say to my parents and around the household, "I love you," because that's how I learned to express myself in the American culture. They would look at me rather weird, like, "Are you okay?" They even called me estranged. So as I hear these echoes from my childhood now, that quote makes complete sense to me. Whether you like a person or not, it's the idea of not showing others your hand and not being completely vulnerable with others. Moving in caution with people has always been a reoccurring theme, whether it's protecting your reputations or to keep from being called disrespectful or labeled, or avoiding being vulnerable so that people won't take advantage of you or hurt you. I understood that her fear for me was hidden behind her words. And You know, I followed these instructions because that's how I was raised, and I never saw it as something to rebel against. My daughter, however, is growing up in a completely different culture. She hears my warnings differently than what I heard my mother's warnings as. While the girl in Jamaica Kincaid's only response to her mother was, "But I didn't sing Binna on Sundays at all, and never in Sunday school." And, "But what if the baker won't let me feel the bread?" These are her only responses, where she is more taking in the instructions and trying to understand where her mother is coming from, or questioning if she can meet those expectations instead of taking offense. And notice she is not talking back. She's not responding to even being called a slut. She's not defensive. She doesn't show that she's insulted by what the mother is even saying. And that's because I was raised in a West Indian environment where you automatically recognize mom means no harm. So I do not question her instructions or view what she's saying as criticism or constant correction as lack of love, because that was the culture norm I understood. But for my daughter, it's quite different. And she is quite different from the girl in the story. My daughter is growing up in a different environment, in a different culture, with different values. As an American born, what I mean as protection, my daughter interprets it as being strict, controlling, or even offensive. What I say out of fear, she more so hears criticism. What I intend to be guidance, she receives it as being strict. And what I see as concern, she sees it as lack of trust. So today, children view strict rules and constant warnings from parents as them preventing them from living their lives and having fun or even being themselves. So as a mother, I see a danger and a consequence, while she sees opportunity and freedom. There are moments when I see frustration in her eyes, and my God, the attitude, the arguments, the talkbacks, I wouldn't dare to my mother. Growing up, I was much like the daughter in the story girl, not questioning my mother's laws or authority, not challenging her. I was absorbing everything she said, was absorbing all her lessons. Despite the fact that I was the emotional one, I never openly expressed disagreements. My daughter is quite the opposite. So much so that I have, in fact, started her counseling this year. I often question myself, how does she not see this as me trying to protect her and me wanting the best out of life for her? At times, I even believe that she believes that I do not love her. And the reality is quite the opposite. The very person and thing that you love the most, that you want the best for, that you want to protect, that you fear for, and you do your best to protect them from danger since day one, since they entered this world. You do your best to protect them from mistakes, and you're trying your best to protect them from experiences that can alter their lives, experiences that could hurt them, experiences that can be avoided. But that's not how they perceive it. Outside of the criticism and the warnings and the instructions, we see in the story that all this come from a place of love and a place of prevention, which is how I'm feeling at the moment. Mom gives lessons on never settle by saying this is how you throw a fish back. She teaches the girl how to avoid a bad situation so that, she says, that way something bad won't fall on you. How to fix a bad situation. She says, this is how to make medicine to throw away a child. and even teaching her how to pick herself back up and not dwell on things that don't work out, saying, don't feel too bad about giving up. She teach the daughter how to love and be loved back, to understand what it looks like when a man bullies you. And that's not love. She even points out how to make sure to know how to take care of yourself financially. In the quote, this is how to make ends meet. So all this preparing your child for life. You know, this story for me was a wake-up call. And I'm thankful that my professor introduced me to this text, to the story, and forced me to really see myself and look inward, evaluating my ways of parenting instead of focusing or blaming my ways on my mother's flaws. Instead, I could see parts of myself in her, a mother who was simply scared and desperately wants to protect her daughter and wants her daughter to be cautious in this cold world. And I have been repeating that same cycle that was handed down to me. While my intentions may have came from love and protection, the way those intentions are communicated matters just as much. There are healthier ways to express my fears because love can be misunderstood, especially when it's communicated through fears. I had to ask myself while reflecting on this short story whether or not that some of my daughter's behavior, her anger, her rebellion, could it be connected to my parenting style, to things that I have carried over from my childhood, especially when she entered the adolescent stage in her life. There's been constant arguments, attitude, outbursts, power struggle between the two of us. Before the story, I saw those behaviors as her being difficult and defiant. But after reading the Jamaica Kincaid story, Girl, I question whether or not I'm the problem, especially considered the unhealthy generational patterns that I have continued. And breaking generational cycles for me is going to require me to learn new ways to express protecting my daughter without making it feel like criticism or control or name calling. The story helped me see my daughter, and I don't want her to grow up questioning whether I love her or simply because my fears were louder than my affection. I really don't want that. If I'm not careful, my daughter may remember my fears more than my love. This was a very, very powerful eye-opener for me. And it showed me that there are changes that I need to make. Not because I love my daughter any less, but because I love her enough to grow alongside her. And the story has made me recognize more the importance of mental health. Growing up, counseling or emotional wellness, or it wasn't a conversation, and it wasn't openly discussed in my family or in our culture. As I got older, in this American culture, we learned that mental wellness is extremely important. So the story really challenged me to consider how my words and my parenting style may have been affecting my daughter's self-esteem and her confidence and her emotional wellness. And it makes me uncomfortable because it's very necessary moving forward to learn healthier ways to communicate with her, to listen more, to express my concerns without having her feel judged or controlled. I want her to be happy, just like the mother in the story wanted her daughter to be happy. I want her to survive this world.